a 3-inch flange on the top, and then 2 inches at the fascia. Okay, so 2 by 3, 3 by 2, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Now, what about fasteners? What about my nails? Okay, so nails have to go every 8 to 10 inches on center. Now, I used to install and I kind of have this running joke where it's like, I've never seen a roofer with a tape measure going every 8 to 10 inches on center. So I don't expect you guys to do the same thing either, right? Just kind of guesstimate. If it's a 10-foot run, throw in about 10 to 12 nails and call it good. You don't have to go up there with no tape measure. I'm not going to torture you guys like that, all right? Cool. So as far as details go right here, it's up to whatever, you're used to, whatever you're comfortable with. That's it. We don't have any detail specifications where you have to do it this way. No, not at all. Okay. Now, on the gable side, you can either use this D-style, like the one that we have here, or you can use regular drip edge metal, like the one that we have down there. Either one works. Okay. But the one thing that you have to remember is that here on the eaves, with starter strip and shingles, you have to have a certain overhang. Okay. We don't want you guys to to butt it up against the drip edge. We gotta have an overhang of 1/4 inch to 3/4 of an inch. Okay, same thing goes for the starter strip, for the shingles, just so that way whenever you do get water, that it doesn't wake up and go inside the system, right? So if you have a little bit of overhang but not too much, it should help out with that. One thing that I've seen, not every single time, but here and there, I'll see people that do an overhang of about 1 inch, 2 inches. But what happens over time is that because of that weight, it tends to kind of curl up and buckle. So making sure that you have a 1/4 inch, or you can just use your first knuckle like I normally do, or what most people do. That's fine with us too. Okay. And with that too, if we have this D style, like this one that has this small little lip right here, we can use this. We can butt it up against this one here. Okay. But what I recommend is bring it out about 1/4 inch, just to help out against that wick again. So if you're using this D style, you can butt it up. Okay, so one thing that we should always try to look at as well is our decking, okay? So if I were to butt up my sheets of plywood or OSB, if I butt it up against each other, what's gonna happen, depending on the temperature, is that material is gonna start, it's gonna kind of telegraph through the shingles, right? So one thing that we have to do is that we have to have a space in between sheets of plywood or OSB. Okay, because of expansion and contraction. The same thing happens with shingles too. When we butt it up against too close to the step flashing, if I don't leave that space in between, then it's gonna get too close. Okay, so the number one rule for these sheets of plywood, even though here they're kind of butted up against each other, is to have a 1/8 inch separation in between those things. Okay, you can use H-clips, you can use nails, you can put your finger if you want, but we gotta make sure to have some kind of spacing in between. Okay. So, as far as plywood, this one's kind of obvious. We got to make sure that it's not rotten, that there's no mold underneath, that we have ventilation, that good stuff, okay? So we talked about the wood, we talked about drip edge. Any questions at this point with either one of those topics? We're all good? Good? All right. Again, there's no such thing as a dumb answer or question, okay? So, since I'm from San Diego, so a few things changed. My TMs, you guys may know the local codes better than I do. So if I mess something up, or if I misspeak, please call me out, all right? So the next thing here, okay, is gonna be our leak barrier, right? So with our leak barrier, in places in the north, or places where it's super cold, like you guys get a lot of snow out here, is that we have to install leak barrier, okay? Or ice and water, depending on how you know it. For GAF, it's leak barrier. We have weather watch and we have storm guard. The one that we have here, this one's storm guard here, okay? So if we're installing leak barrier on the eaves, we've got to make sure that we go 24 inches past the warm wall, okay? Now, what's the warm wall? It's this puppy right here. So we've got to make sure to go 24 inches past that. Since you guys get ice dams, you guys get a lot of snow loads, we have to make sure to secure this area the most that we can, especially with when you get that frosting and defrosting and that whole thing. This is going to help it out. This is the only material that's actually that's what do you call it? Waterproof, right? The rest of it, the shingles, everything else is just water resistant. This is the only thing that's waterproof. Okay, so when I put a nail here, it's actually gonna self-seal. Other than that, everything is pretty much open. Okay. So we have to make sure to go 24 inches past that warm wall. The other place that we have to install leak barrier is going to be our valley. Okay. So the valley and our eaves are the only areas that I'm actually installing the leak barrier directly on the wood. Everywhere else, it's going to be on top of the paper. Okay. So please remember that one. So once I'm working my valley, I'm going to put a full three foot roll on that. Okay. You don't cut it in half. People are like, oh, can I use 3/4 of it, half of it? No, it's got to be the whole thing. We run it up all the way up, and then we want to make sure to kind of push it in there. If you have any voids like this one up here, like this right here, that stuff up there, it's not going to cut it, because if you get water in there, then you could get some water in there if you don't press it down correctly. Okay, so we have to make sure to press it down directly on the wood. Now, the other place that we have to talk about too is going to be on the transition area. So roof to wall transitions, we've got to make sure to go up a minimum of 5 inches, 5 to 6 inches. Okay. Yeah.
So you're saying you put the felt paper down against the wall and then the leak barrier?
Yeah. So you've got two options here. Okay. So you can either go up against the wall like how we have it here, or what you could do is you could leave about this much, this much spacing, of exposed wood, and then have our, so I'll run my paper up to about here. Okay. Leave this exposed, run my leak barrier up this way, so that way it's, you have a portion of it touching the paper and the other half touching the actual wood, and then going up the wall. You know what I mean? So either one is good. It's up to your preference really. So, cool. Yeah, so on these roof to wall transitions, 5 to 6 inches, again, you can either have a little bit exposed, you can run your paper all the way through, whatever you like. I don't know, for you guys, do you guys run leak barrier up on the rakes? Or no? No, nothing on the rakes? If you do, I don't want to assume anything. If you do run it up the rakes, you can do the same thing. Again, leave a little bit exposed and then run it over. But if you're not doing it, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so we just talked about eaves, valleys, transitions. Now, what about skylights? What about chimneys? We've got to make sure to get those areas as well, right? So in those areas, we got to make sure to wrap it all the way up. If I have my skylight, if it runs up again like up this high, we got to make sure to run it all the way to the top. Okay, all the way to the top. Last week, we had one of these trainings, and they were saying, oh, can I run it up, an inch underneath the top? And we talked to one of the guys from corporate, and they're like, no, we got to run it all the way to the top, just so that way we can secure the whole area. Okay. So chimneys, pipes as well. So if I have a pipe right here, I've got to make sure to go over the paper again. Okay. So remember that. The biggest thing with that one is that it has to be a 20 by 20 sheet of leak barrier. So this material here, you have to cut out 20 inches. Now you can just put it directly on top of the underlayment here, or what you could do is you could run your shingles all the way up, and once you get to this area right here where the pipe is, you can just put down your leak barrier and set that leak barrier on top of that shingle right before you continue with the install. So you can lay it on there just in case it's like a triple protective layer in case you do get water in there. If it doesn't shut off of the leak barrier, then it'll shut off the shingle and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I mean, as far as the, do you guys have to install on the ridges or on the hips or anything like that? Is that local codes for this area? Do you
install
know?
what?
Leak barrier on the ridges or on the hips? No? Cool. All right, so the other thing with this one, you can use cap nails. You don't have to. We did here because we didn't take off or actually we did here. But, it's up to you if you want to put cap nails. You don't have to. This stuff is pretty sticky, especially once it's out there and it starts, getting warm. That stuff is going to get pretty sticky up there. The next thing, okay? Let's talk about underlayments. So with underlayments, the biggest thing that I would say, and it says it down here, it says use only plastic cap nails or plastic cap staples. Okay, so we have to make sure to use plastic cap staple or plastic cap nails. You can use plastic, or you can use staples just to square it off, right? If it's a super steep roof, if it's, you know, something that's just uncomfortable, you can put some staples just to square it off. But other than that, I would use cap nails all the way through. Okay, cap nails all the way through. As far as how you install it, okay, in the perimeter. So this row right here, the one up here. The way that we want you guys to install it is to go every 12 inches off center. So each one of these targets right here are 6 inches. So we want you to go every 12 inches off center. So you would hit one here, skip this one, hit this one, skip this one, and do that all the way around. Okay, up here too, on the seams. So on the seams as well, if I have a seam right here where it ends, make sure to go every 12 inches here. On these 2 rows right here, we've got to make sure to go every 24 inches in a staggered pattern, okay? So again, each one of these is 6 inches, right? So I'll hit one here, skip 3, so 6, 12, 18. And on that 4th one is where I put that second cap nail. And again, staggered. So if I hit one here, I try to go, you know, a little bit over either way, and then go in that way just so that we have a little bit more surface area with those cap nails. Now I get the question, so what do you guys want, what do you guys want cap nails over staples? So the reason is because this cap, or this little cap right here, is gonna protect it against any leaks, right? If you have a staple, it's just open and you can get some water in there. The other question is, why do we use underlayments, right? So one of them is pretty obvious, so water resistance, right? The second one is for, so if I were to put shingles on top of the plywood, over time, that wood's gonna soak up all the oils from the shingle and it's gonna dry it out. So that's the second reason why we install underlayment as well. So it's gonna help protect against the wood and water resistance too. Now, on the headlaps, they make it pretty easy for us. So here, this is the minimum right here, is to bring it down a minimum of 3 inches. Okay, we bring it down this much on the headlap, that's all we need. Now on side laps, if my roll ends right here and I gotta bring one over this way, I gotta bring it over at least 6 inches, okay? So 6 inches on this one. And the really cool thing about this one, about this underlayment or all of our synthetics, is that these little cubes are 2 by 2. So it makes it pretty easy. Just bring it over, you know, 3 cubes over and that's it. So can't make it any easier than that. The next thing too, so since we're talking about underlayments, is that we have to, so on valleys, on ridges, on hips, we have to make sure to go over 6 inches. So that's what we have here, right? So we brought it over 6 inches, and that's it. The other thing that you could do too is you could run your underlayments underneath the leak barrier here. So it might be stuck, but no, I guess not. You can run your paper underneath that, and then put your leak barrier over it, and then secure it that way as well. So either one works. I kind of like putting it underneath just so that it's a little bit more secure this way. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this, but you know, just personal preference. But yeah, like in here, we went in about 6 inches, making sure that you're not penetrating any holes here in the middle, okay? Gotta make sure to stay as far as possible. You know, 6 inches, 8 inches. I've heard some people go as far as 20 inches, 18. You know, so it's up to you how far you wanna stay away, okay? So hip 6 inches. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, just to kind of reiterate, here you could run it all the way through, stop there, or you could, you know, stay away 6 to 8 inches, and that's it. The one thing that I'll say with this material here, with the Weather Watch, what I like to do, so in the book or in the rules it says to just bring it over 3 inches here, okay? Where the shiny part is, to bring it 3 inches. But what I like to do is I like to bring it all the way down here, about a foot away from the bottom of the eave. Why? Because especially in the summertime and the springtime, once you know it starts warming up a little bit, this material here gets super, like, I don't know, it gets like kind of slippery underneath you. So just to make it safer for my guys, for myself, I like to bring it down about a foot away, just so that way I can walk on something, because this is a lot easier to walk on than this stuff here. So, you know, just, you can relay that over to your guys, let them know. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more material, but the safety aspect of it is so much better, right? So, that's good. The really cool thing about these lines too is that if these lines are straight and it leads all the way to your ridge and it's pretty much, you know, squared off with that, that means that you're going straight. If it's a little bit off, then you may be a little bit off on your shingles as well, so just keep that in mind. What are you guys normally using? Are you guys using felt buster, tiger paw, deck armor?
We use felt buster,
Felt buster?
unless we upsell it to
Okay.
other two, yeah.
Nice, Ben's a tiger paw?
Tiger paw.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, what about you guys? What do you guys, felt buster? Nice. So,
Can you tell us a little bit of the difference?
yeah, absolutely. So felt buster, so this is our synthetic underlayment. It's a great product, you know, it's got great traction and everything. The only difference, or one of the differences between tiger paw, deck armor, and then felt buster is that felt buster isn't it's a non-breathable synthetic. Okay, so if you were to look at the backing of this, it's pretty much just straight, you know, I wouldn't even be able, I can't tell you what material it is, but I think it's just like fiberglass or something, but it's not breathable. If you rip open, or if you can try to cut through tiger paw, if you look in the center of that, it's got like some kind of like aluminum inside of it. So if you know, like, you know, dry fit shirts like Nike, Under Armour, and all that kind of stuff, that's kind of how tiger paw is, right? So if you get some kind of, you know, condensation, if you get moisture in there, it's gonna have wick moisture technology that's gonna help it, you know, help all that moisture get out. The same thing with our deck armor too. So if you look in the middle of that, it's like a 3-ply system, right? It's got, you know, the bottom sheet, the top sheet, and then the middle, it's got like some, I don't even know, I wouldn't even call it aluminum. It's more like fiberglass, I don't know. But if you look in the middle of that, it's got a 2-way breathable pass. So it lets air in and then any moisture that's in there takes it out as well. Yeah, so those are the advantages of it. The other thing about this one, since I live in California, one of the biggest things that they look for is like Class A fire ratings and all that kind of stuff. This material here is not a Class A fire rating, or it doesn't have the Class A fire rating. So if your county, if your location's big on that kind of stuff, this doesn't have it. If you want to get all correct, you know, if you want to do it the correct way, which most people don't do, but if, you know, I would like to relay this information, is that if you do lay down felt buster and you're working in an area where they ask you for, you know, Class A fire ratings, what you can do is you can run another sheet over it called Versa Shield, and that's going to give it that Class A fire rating, okay? But by itself, it doesn't have it. The other thing is that it doesn't breathe. The traction is awesome. It's a lot stronger than normal organic felts, right? So yeah. Any other questions as far as, you know, underlayments, even leak barriers or anything like that? So far, so good?
You mentioned the Class A, the Tiger Paw. Is that Class A rated?
Yeah, tiger paw and then deck armor race.
Deck armor,
Those
okay.
two.
Can you talk about the new storm guard?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just thinking about that too. So, like I said before, so we have 2 leak barriers, okay? So we have Weather Watch, which is what I have here, and then Storm Guard, which is my favorite, okay? So the reason why I like it a lot more is because it has well, for one, I can use it for solar. I come from a solar background, so that's what you would be installing with your solar panels. So the fire rating, or not the fire rating, but the temperature for it, it's pretty high. It's 250 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's very, you know, temperature resistant. The traction on that thing is awesome. So before it used to be something that was similar to this color and even the feel of it. Now it's a blue. It's a new synthetic on top, you know, where you walk on. And yeah, it's very good. I mean, one of the things that they're thinking about doing, I don't know if it's storm guard necessarily, but it's a new leak barrier or underlayment that they're working on. And they're only shooting it to certain markets, but at some point they're going to bring it to this market, I'm pretty sure. Is that it's like this, what would you call it, man? I just heard about it about a month ago. It's like this, it's like for hurricanes. It's like this certain, I don't know if it's a leak barrier or it's some kind of product that's going to be like an underlayment that can stay out for about a year or something like that. So this is coming out. It may come out to this market, but you know, stuff is in the oven right now. Okay, but yeah, StormGuard very similar as this as far as how you install it. You install it on your valleys, any vulnerable areas, valleys, transitions, all those areas. Okay, so I mean, Eric, I mean, have you seen, you know, what are some of the advantages that you've seen with the StormGuard? You
Yeah, I mean, just how walkable it is as a leak barrier is incredible. We're trying to get it up here a little bit more, but I know Adam in Richmond has a contractor to switch all his leak barrier to storm guard just because it's so walkable. You can dance on it, nothing's gonna happen.
Play soccer?
You play, you can do,
Yeah, so,
Is it more expensive
it's a little bit more expensive, but no, as far as
than deck
walkability,
armor?
what's that?
It's more expensive than deck armor?
I'm not too sure, man. I mean, they would know better than I do. I mean, the thing about me is I just train. I don't know about prices or anything like that. But I do know it's a little bit more.
yeah, it's comparable to, I wanna say like, with 300 as a leak barrier, so it should be similar.
Gotcha. Great. Yeah, go ahead. That's pretty much it as far as the papers go. So at this point, let's go ahead and start looking at the starter strips, okay? So do I have any installers here? Are we mainly just salespeople? Or do I have any installers in here? No? Okay. Sales? Gotcha. Okay, so again, with starter strips, right? With starter strips and shingles, we have to make sure to have that overhang. Don't forget that. With the nailing placement, we've got to make sure that we put it down here about, an inch and a half to 3 inches, for the reason being that if I put it up here, what's going to happen over time is that if I have strong enough winds, it's going to lift up a lot easier than if I put it down here, right? If I put it here, it's going to be a lot harder. So you have to make sure to put it down here around this zone right here. Not penetrating the adhesive here, but right above it. Now, the other thing to remember too is to take off about 6 inches off of our very first starter strip, all right? Because if we compare the starter strip to our regular shingle, it's about 1 inch off. So by taking off the 6 inches, it's gonna help offset those keyways, okay? So if I'm right here, I'm gonna take off my 6 inches. I'm gonna put my nails down here, about 1.5 inches to 2 inches from the sides, then about 8 to 10 inches from here to here, and same thing on this side. Okay, about 1.5 inches to 2 inches over here, 8 to 10 inches over here, and that's it. Now, if I'm doing four nails on the starter strip, then I have to do 4 nails on the shingles as well. If I'm doing 5 on the shingles, 5 on the starter strip as well. Okay, so however many you're doing on the starter strip is how many I do on the shingles. Okay. Now, okay, so we got that. Boom, boom, boom. Let's see. On these rakes. So if I've got mine right here if I've got this one here, I took off my 6 inches. Now, the main thing that GAF is looking for on these rakes, okay, so I just cut that off, right? So the biggest thing for GAF on these rakes is for us to bring it down this one over the intersecting E starter strip a minimum of 3 inches, okay? So about that much. Okay, so that's the biggest thing that GAF is looking for. Now, what I like to do, what I did on that roof, is that I would bring it all the way down here, and then I would cut a 45-degree angle cut right there, okay? So by doing that, it's gonna give me a little bit more adhesive on that area. So go ahead and cut that. It'll be a little bit better, right? I don't have my tools with me, but so by doing that 45-degree angle cut there, I've got my adhesives all around that area there. Okay, so the number one enemy besides besides water is wind, right? So in that corner area, I'm gonna get a little bit more resistance there. So that's why we do that. Okay. Now, when you put down your starter strips, you don't put it on top of each other. You don't go like that. You don't go like that. You put it up against each other, and that's it. We have people that try to go over like this. We don't have to. Okay. Now, for valleys, normally they're gonna say to never weave. You can weave with the starter strip. You have to weave. So if I've got one going this way, I've got to make sure to pass this the valley center line for a minimum of 12 inches. Okay, so we're gonna pass it up 12 inches going this way too. But yeah, that's pretty much it as far as starter strips. We do have two different kinds. We have our Pro Start and we have our Weather Blocker. Pro Start is what we have here. It's a little bit more narrow than our Weather Blocker. Weather Blocker is more for like designer shingles. It's kind of like our universal starter strip, but Pro Start is just as good too. It's the one that I normally see all over the place. So yeah, that one's really, really good. One thing with our so if we're using Pro Start and we're using Timberland HDZ, you know how we have that strike zone that's about 2 inches now? We've got to make sure that on that Timberline that we hit on the very first line when we're trying to tack it into the starter strip. Okay. So let's just imagine that this is my HDZ. And you don't have to take this stuff off. I've seen people that try to take it off, but you don't have to. So I'm gonna use two. So this one's gonna be my shingle. I don't know if we have any here, but let's just imagine this is my shingle here, okay? If my strike zone is about that big, okay, just picture that strike zone is about that big right there. If I tack it in the middle of that, it's not grabbing onto this starter strip here, okay? But if I use that first line, what it's gonna do is it's gonna hit the shingle and the starter strip at the same time too, okay? So we've gotta make sure to use that first line. Only on the first row. After that, you can use the 2 inch strip. With Weather Blocker, which it is a little bit wider than this one that we have here, it'd go up to about there. Yeah, you could use anywhere in that zone, in that 2 inch zone, okay? So one thing that we should also talk about a little bit is nails, right? So sometimes we're going quick, I'm looking at it from an installer point of view. Sometimes we're going quick, we're trying to lay down squares, that's how we get paid. But we sometimes forget to look at the compressor. Sometimes we forget to look at the gauge, right? So this is something that we have to talk to our guys about, right? Check the compressor. We've got to change it from it's got to be different from the morning than when you leave that job and in the afternoon. So we have to check, just like with TPO that we're always checking our seams and all that kind of stuff. Same thing with shingles and nails. We've got to, kind of test them out in the morning, test them out in the afternoon after you're done eating, and then towards the end around 2:33, let's test it out again. Because one of the things that I always hear, and this is something that we were talking about last week, was the pressure on our nails and how much it's penetrating through. Okay, so this is something that we have to talk about. I can't give you specific numbers. I can't, because everywhere is different. I go from East Coast to West Coast, but generally from about 95 to 120 is kind of the sweet spot. Okay, so again, I can't give you specific numbers, but somewhere in between there is going to help you out. We've got different kind of nails, right? These are perfect examples, right? These are, we've got, it's a 90, it's not angled, it's not, it's not sideways, it's nothing like that. These are perfect nails. One of the things that we used to see back in the day, and one thing that, truly I used to do in the beginning was, was not hitting that line, right? I've seen, I've gone to places where we train and they're on the roof and they don't even try to hit that line. We've got to make sure to hit it. I know we're going fast for, that's how we make money, we by laying down squares. But if you don't hit that line, then what we see over time is that it can actually delaminate, right? So there was an instance about 2 months ago where I was on a roof and this guy had been shingling for about 16 years and he wasn't even trying to hit that line. I think it was natural shadow, so he was just, hitting it wherever he could. Yeah. And I was like, hey dude, I didn't want to offend him. I didn't want to ask him, hey, how long have you been doing this? But I was like, hey, man, do you know, what happens if you don't hit that line? He's like, oh, I think it delaminates or something like that. And I was like, why aren't you hitting it? And he's like, oh, well, I'm just getting paid by the square. They're not hitting me to be accurate. So I was like, all right.
Wow.
Yeah, but so, and that goes to show it's someone that's been on the roof for many years and he's still doing that. So that's why, GAF started doing that 2 inch strike zone. So that way, Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, and of the world can hit that, all right? So, so the HTZ is very good. It's got a lot of different things. So if you flip that shingle, you know, if you flip it around, you'll see that in the back it has about 19 to 21 little dots. Okay, so what they did is they actually mechanically fastened the shingle. So instead of it being just adhesive, now it's actually getting crimped inside of that factory. Okay, so it's a lot harder for it to delaminate. One thing that I would say, even on mansard roofs, on those, you know, those pitches that are almost straight, that almost looks like a wall, it's not in any technical bulletin, it's nowhere. This is just, you know, from roofer to roofer. If I were to be working on those, what I would do, even though it's a great shingle and everything, with all shingles, what I would do is I would put 8 nails and then put asphalt roofing cement in the middle of them too, so that way it doesn't delaminate. Because even the best shingles in the world, it can't resist that 16 and up pitch. Okay, so just put 8 nails and put, you know, mastic in between. Okay, so I know I'm going all over the place, but once we start talking about roofing, man, I get it. So I start thinking about everything and everything. Okay, so now with shingles, okay, so with shingles, the biggest thing that I want you guys to take away from this training is the HGZ staircase pattern, okay? So does anybody know what the staircase pattern for the HGZ is? And it's okay if you don't know it, that's why we're here. You can even kind of throw out some numbers and no worries, it's okay. I got you. So for the HGZ, we've got to have a full shingle. We've got to cut off 6 inches off of that second one, 11, and then 17. And then we go back to a full shingle again. Okay? So that's the biggest thing. The biggest, one of the things that I see all over the place with staircase patterns is that they do full, 6, 12, 18, and then they do 2 little small ones. So whatever, you know, whatever's kind of waste, they put on the top. But the reason why we want you guys to do full 6, 11, 17 is because of just purely aesthetics. Once you start adding, you know, the little pieces at the top, you start losing that look. So just remember full, 6, 11, and 17. Okay, full 6, 11, 17. Now with that and shingles, or with the valleys, if you use Timberline HGZ, you can do the California Close Cut Valley, okay? Only with the Timberline series. The 2 best valleys that I can tell you for the warranty will be your Close Cut Valley, which is where you run all your shingles on the lower side or lower pitch, and then go over it on the bigger side, bigger volume plane, and go over it that way. You do your cut. Then you cut off the dog ears, put mastic underneath, and all that good stuff. So that's the Close Cut Valley. It's pretty much acceptable with all shingles except for 2. I think it's the Camelot 2 and Grand Sequoia. I think those are the only 2 that's not acceptable, but it's only because it's so thick that you can't cut it. So it's gonna look, you know, awful if you start doing it like that. The next one is gonna be your open metal valley. So that's the one with the 24-inch W valley. You nail it. That one's the other one that's acceptable. The one that I see all the time, because I'm out in the West, is the California valleys. Yeah, I know, right? No pun intended, right? So with the California style, and everybody has different names. I mean, I was talking to someone 2 weeks ago, and they were saying, "Oh, we call that one the shark tooth," or someone's gonna call it something else. So if I'm losing you, it's okay. You guys probably call it a different way, but I'll explain it real quick. So the California close cut, you do your smaller side. Let's just say that for this one, it's actually this one here. Smaller side this way. You run it 12 inches past your valley center line. Then you run your bigger side, and it doesn't matter how much you go over it because you're gonna cut that in either way. Or actually, no, hold on. Smaller side, then you do 1 on the bigger side. Then you run a bleeder strip all the way from the bottom, all the way to the top. And what that bleeder strip is, it's just a shingle, and they run it up the valley center line, and that helps them by not cutting anything. And it's a guide as well. It looks pretty clean and all, but the thing about that bleeder strip is that, like, for areas like this where you get a lot of snow, ice, and all that kind of stuff, it tends to go inside. So it's gonna lift up that bleeder strip, and then now you have a lot of water inside your valley area. So yeah, so you run your bleeder strip, then you go over it with your big side. And you can do this style, but only with the Timberline series from a 4 and 12 up to a 16 and 12. So in case your guys are doing it, it is acceptable, but only with the Timberline series. All right. All right. Any questions up to this point? Yeah.
Open metal valves.
Yeah.
What, can you go over the specifics on, we don't do it now, but we're looking to get into it.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a certain gauge, right?
Yeah.
Thickness
I mean,
and certain-
I know the width. It has to be a minimum of 12 inches. Most people do 24, but 20 inches is fine.
20 is what it is.
The biggest thing, I don't know, and this is even kind of weird for me, but the next thing for that, when you're tackling it in there, is that you don't penetrate through the metal. So what they want you to do is that they want you to use the nail head to hold it down on the sides, on the edges.
Okay.
So instead of hitting the actual metal, yeah, dude, I would say, I would go every 5 inches, man, just in case. I think it says like 8 inches, but I would go every 5 inches just to be secure, especially if you're not going through the metal. 5 inches. Yeah, and then go underneath it. Do a line of mastic or roofing cement underneath it as well. Don't put too much because then it's gonna bleed through. I used to do solar. That was my gig, was putting a lot of mastic, you know. But you know, that's the thing. If you're a good roofer, you don't really need it. But for that, since you're putting it or laying it over metal, put a little bit of mastic over that too.
Okay.
Now, don't do geocell, don't do M1, don't do any silicone-based, caulking, because the thing is that when you go, and I just learned this one too, if you put that on shingles, it can actually damage it. Okay, so the best thing that you can do is go asphalt to asphalt, mastic roofing cement on your shingles. Okay. But no, good question. Any other questions like that? Even, it could be a random one, something that I haven't talked to you about. Some goodwill would be good.
That was a hell of a good question, George. You just keep them coming, brother.
Another thing too, I mean, this is kind of random, but it comes up all the time too, is with you know how I said that you should put your nails about 1.5 to 3 inches down here, depending on your gutter guards, right? So if you put gutter guards, you may have to go a little bit higher, and that's fine by us. Okay. Something that I see all the time on the west. When I throw out that number or when I tell them to put it down here, there's always that discussion where it's like, oh no, like you gotta put gutter guards, it's not gonna fit, it's gonna look ugly. In those situations, yeah, you can go a little bit higher, okay? Because we understand that that's, it's tough sometimes. Actually, one thing that I forgot to speak to too is for drip edge. If I have one piece of drip edge and I'm going over the other one, this little space right here where the overlap, it's gotta be no more than 3 inches. No more than 3 inches, and it's purely just aesthetics, just so that way you don't have that big border, or that it doesn't lift up that much, okay? Yeah.
Drip edge in the corner.
Yeah. Like the detail, or?
I thought it was supposed to be corner cut.
Oh, yeah, with that, I mean, with details, with that quarter, it's up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. That's really it. There's no specific where it tells you have to do this cut and that cut, whatever you feel comfortable with, as long as you're covering this area here. This is what they're the most concerned about.
Okay.
But no specifics on that. Any other questions over here? All right. So shingles, boom, boom, boom.
Any difference between the gold and the silver that we need to know about other than the 4 and 5 products?
Not really, man. I mean, as far as I would say that as far as installation, if you just do it the golden pledge all the way through, like everything that we speak to this point, then you shouldn't have to worry about anything, man. It's very, very similar. A few differences here and there, but the thing that I just recommend to all the Master Elites, just do every job as if it were a golden pledge, and you should be covered. Yep. All right. So now let's get into chimneys, right? So for chimneys and chimney crickets or saddles, when you're required to have a chimney cricket or a saddle, it starts from like any place in the northern area. So from the northern Dixie and southern Dixie line, anything above that area, you're gonna require a chimney cricket. So all areas in the northern part of the United States is gonna require it. All roofs steeper than a 6 to 12 will require a chimney cricket. And then any chimney cricket or any chimney wider than 24 inches will also require it. And that's from the NRCA codes. It's not even GAF at this point. So anything that has any one or all three, then you're gonna require it. Okay. Now you can use, you can make it out of wood, you can make it out of copper. We have the guy that I was here with actually a couple months ago. He does it out of, he has a sheet metal guy. He sends them out, all the dimensions, and then he gets it done. So that works with us too. We just gotta make sure that we have it. Okay. So that's chimney crickets. Now let's get into to ventilation, right? So this one's kind of tough because for the most part, not that everybody does it wrong, but I think everybody has the wrong idea on how to do it. So there's a stat out there that 9 out of 10 homes is improperly ventilated. So with ventilation, you've got to have a 50-50 system, right? So 50% on the intake and then 50% on the exhaust. But one of the things that I see is that everybody opens up the brake, right? Because we think, we have to, they send us this much, exhaust, this much, Cobra, Snow Country Advanced, and I've got to open it up and install it that way. But no, the way that we should be doing it is that we should be opening up certain sections on the exhaust. Okay. But before we get into that, okay, I want to make sure that as salespeople, as project managers, wherever we are, even the installer, that we always check in inside the attic. Okay. When you're in there, when you're having that, when you're doing your bidding, when you're doing the sale, just ask the homeowner, be like, hey, can I check out the attic space? Why? Because I've got to make sure, I got to look for daylight. I want to make sure that you have soft vents. I want to make sure that you have some ventilation going in there. And honestly, that can help you out with the sale. I mean, how many people, what if Chuck in the truck, what if Tank Top Tommy stops by and doesn't even ask that, just gives them a low price? And now that they heard that from you, they're gonna be like, oh, this guy or this woman is the expert, right? They're actually taking time out of their day and checking out the ventilation. Now, not only that, but you're also checking in there for, are they covering up the soffit vents? Or is there, are they blowing in there that foam insulation? Is it, do they have, rotted wood? Do they have water going through their attic? You can start seeing all those little things. So now that you've done that checkup, now let's look around, look outside, make sure that that they have soft vents. Sometimes they install them, but they don't open them up. Sometimes they just beat them in there with a hammer. They just go in there with the hole saw and they just start making random little holes. So check all that out. But yeah, and then the other thing with ventilation too is that they mix up, ventilation products too. So sometimes you'll see like a gable vent, and then you'll see like a Cobra attic ventilation, and then when you do that, when you mix up ventilation products like that, you can actually confuse the system, and you're only ventilating that area right there, right? So we've got to make sure to have like a point A to a point B, where it's just flowing out, it's a direct flow. If you have obstructions in the middle, then what's going to happen is you're just going to have ventilation in a certain area, either at the bottom portion of it or the top portion of it. They're only ventilating that area there. Now, the next thing too is that with like O'Hagan's, I don't know if you guys use O'Hagan's that much, but one of the things that, and what an O'Hagan is, it's this low profile ventilation product, either intake or exhaust. It's super popular where I'm from. And what they'll do is they'll do like 4 rows of that stuff sometimes, depending on how big that attic space is. They'll put 3 or even 4 rows, but once you start adding that many rows in between, you can start confusing the system again. So be mindful of how you're kind of laying them down as well, okay? So with ventilation, the 50-50 system, right? You've got to have 50% intake, 50% exhaust. And if I could pick one over the other, I would do a little bit more intake than exhaust. Okay, and the way that you got to think about it kind of is like a hose, right? if I take off the nozzle, if I take off the head, that creates pressure. And I take that off and I turn on the hose, all that water's just gonna, it's just gonna land like on my shoe, right? It's gonna land right there. But if I put that head, if I put that pressure on it and I install it, it's gonna shoot a lot further. It's the same thing with ventilation as well. So if I have a little bit more intake to push it out my exhaust, the better. Now, you guys may have that, you may have heard of that ventilation calculator that we have. If you haven't, I would highly recommend you guys use it. It's gonna ask you for either the attic floor space, the length times the width. So if you have either one, you can just put it in that ventilation calculator, and it'll give you all the everything that you need to know. So for intake, it'll tell you how much intake for Cobra Snow Country Advanced, for Cobra Ridge Vent 3, it's gonna tell you how many you need. 16 linear feet, 20 linear feet. It's gonna tell you all in that platform. Now remember how I said that most people, what they'll do, most installers will cut the whole ridge vent and install it. If you do your calculation right, if you do it through the attic ventilation calculator, it's gonna tell you to open up 20 feet, 20 linear feet. With that, if my Cobra Snow Country Advance is only 4 feet, then I only have to cut out 5 different sections if it's like a 40-foot run. Just cut out those little sections. You're still gonna install the whole run, just for aesthetic purposes, so that way you don't have humps. But only open up a certain amount. Okay?
And spread it out.
And spread it out. That's right.
Spread it out.
So you know what I mean, right? Like just go in that ventilation calculator. Just open up what it tells you to, and that's it.
So spread out the whole.
Yeah.
So instead of just one long continuous
spread it out. Same thing with the
soffit.
if we're doing the Cobra.
Yeah, you even have your airflow. You do it all on one side, the other side is a little motion. So you have one side ventilated really well, and once you get it all in one area, it won't kind of lay down that far border well. So you do like the 2 ends in the middle and split it, it'll do a lot better all the way across. Just to give a lot more.
Good stuff.
And then if the ridge is longer than the intake, then what's it cause, that vacuum effect where it starts to put water in and snow in or whatever?
Yeah, man. I mean, honestly, I don't have too much experience with it because I don't get snow that much, but I've heard of that where it can actually start sucking it in, right? Mm-hmm. So that would make sense too. That's maybe why you guys get that, or why some people get that.
Yeah.
It's because they're opening up the exhaust too much, depending on that wind and all that. So I'm sure if you do it the other way around, it may stop. You might stop getting that. So.
Cool.
Cathedral ceilings, vaulted ceilings,
Yeah.
vented nail base plywood. Do you guys have a GAF?
Yeah, we do have it, dude. Okay. They might even hit me with this on the side of the head with the 2x4. We do have it, but it's like it's so hard to get. Yeah, like I tried telling someone about that last week, and TM, which is who they are, dude, don't even talk about that. Just because I think the lead time on that is like over a year.
Yeah.
So we do have them.
Can we talk about a little bit about that though?
Yeah. So it's basically like it's like kind of like a baffling system that GAF has. So I'll be honest with you, I've never really installed one, but from what I've heard, basically as far as the installation portion of it, I can't tell you the most. I can't tell you the details. We can get together afterwards and talk about how to install it. But as far as the theory behind it and what they use it for is so that you're still gonna use your ventilation at the bottom. You're gonna have like these little baffling systems in between it. It's gonna run it up to the top. Installation, we'll talk about that if you want one-on-one or whoever wants to talk about it. But that's basically the system. Is that it's a baffle system that you put on top of the plywood. So yeah. Any other questions, man? Those were some good questions.
Well, I just want what is the other option if you can? Right?
Yeah.
So,
The other option would just be baffling systems like the ones that get some. Yeah, instead of the rafters and all that. So yeah. So either which is called Thermocal, is the ones that you were talking about, Thermocal, or just regular. That works too.
Thermocal is the baffles you guys sell?
Yeah, the ones that we sell, like the installation ones.
Okay.
Yeah. So now let's get into ventilation. Does anybody else have any other questions regarding ventilation?
Yeah. So
Obviously, GAF wants the airflow coming through the soffits out the ridge vent. Is there any scenario where you might suggest to the customer get rid of a power vent or one of those wind vents
Yeah.
and just go with the soffit ridge vent?
Yeah.
Would that be ideal to offer to suggest that to most customers, or is there like a requirement, or what? Would that? I guess I'm trying to
Yeah.
explain to them, hey, this is the better airflow solution versus what you have, and basically removing what they currently have.
That's right, man. No, that's a very good question. Depending on the size of it, if you think it's gonna help out, then keep it. If you can't get enough, yeah, man, because
Because let's say they don't have a ridge right now.
yeah,
You put a ridge, you put soffits. We should be removing whatever they have on their roof, right?
I would. Just because everything, yeah, because if you leave something, if you have like a whirlybird, if you have a box louver or something like that, then it can obstruct the airflow. So that way you get that static airflow and continuous airflow. And I would just keep it with the soffit and then the exhaust at the top. And just take out everything in between. Because let's just say if, I have my soffit, I do my exhaust at the top, and then I've got something in here in between. Yeah, it's gonna ventilate, but just up to here, right? If I have, a box louver, I don't know, whatever, way against something, it's just gonna stop here, and then up there, you're not getting that continuous flow of ventilation. So, yeah. Good question, man.
What about attic fans?
Attic
Clients, just I want to keep my attic fan. Don't take it out. Does that void the warranty?
No, not in my experience. It hasn't voided any ventilation on my end, so that I've seen, so it should be okay.
What would be the argument keeping it? Is it just for the look? Because we did one a couple weeks ago where we actually took it out and just put the fake gable in the end, and it ended up working out much better. We've also had one we showed up where some people have done it, and they'll open the ridge vent all the way across. And then you're in the dilemma where this roof's 6 months old. How do you go back and seal that back up to where you get your airflow correctly?
Or you can put the felt over some of it, right? You can cover it up with felt.
Like the gable, cover up the gable vent.
Well, we can seal it in. So we had one where we just sealed it in, just put one bias over the side of it, and just put siding across. The other one they wanted to look, so we just got the fake cover and just put that on the side. But we did siding there on those. Or if you're not, you can just leave it in place and screen and put it in the siding again. But they did the ridge fan, they did it all the way across, and they opened it up all the way across, so it wasn't in the correct airflow. So you have to go back. What would be the best way for GAF to go back and seal, let's say 60 or 70% of that to get the airflow correct?
That's a really good question.
Yeah. So you go back and spray foam across to cover 60% or 70%.
That's a really good question, man.
I was told you can put felt over the.
Yeah.
Which
I'm
you
sure you
that's
can.
of course obviously ripping up the ridge caps.
Yeah, and if everything's 6 months old or a year old, at that point you turn around and rip it up. Okay, you can throw down new ones, but you're right at that point where your color's going to change.
Yeah.
That slight fade you're going to have, now you're going to be fighting that match. So from the inside, foam. I think spray foam, but that's not permanent, but you just cut the blocks out of the foam boards. We've done that once now.
That's a really good question, man. The paper, dude, I don't even want to give you the wrong answer, man. As far as warranty, because one of the things I can avoid is the ice dams and the ventilation. So the one thing best thing to go about that is just to call the technical line. They know if you get something from them, then that's blessed, man. I could probably tell you. I could tell you put paper, sure, but just block it off or something.
Even if the paper gives you 50%, and you turn around and you go, say 3/4 of it, that was still going to go back.
That's right. Depending if you're using tire cloth, if you're using deck armor, it's got that.
And that's how tight you get.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I have to tell you, but yeah, I would just call them.
That's it.
Exactly that way they can press it. Yeah. That was a good question too, man. Everyone's asking that.
Maybe use the felt buster underneath it. It's not breathable.
I might have to. What they'll do is open up.
You can use it over.
and you're only right ways to open certain sections. But if you already opened that up all the way through, how do I go back and minimize
So if the ridge vent is cut all the way open, we can put the felt buster over it to cover the short ones.
Yeah, this roof is put over.
They're the ones that. Oh yeah. Like you go back.
Don't take any more.
I'm thinking if you told you can do it over the top, you could go out.
What's we did? So we did take out. So we did first.
Oh yeah. No problem.
I assume that paper you're probably going to lose close to 70, maybe 75, and just kind of space it out. And we just went back into the moisture meter and just checked it like every month, just to try and keep it decent.
There we go.
There's like green flashlights.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Shoot, I had some last week with the jack.
Green
I
flashlights.
also was pretty good.
You can
Absinthe?
see
What?
the moisture in the attic.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm gonna
okay.
order some.
I had some last week with the jack too.
Oh,
Yeah,
was
that's
it
only
orange
what I
orange?
bring.
Morning, God. Eyes
Yeah.
and eyes.
I have a whole like 20 pack of those, so
Damn.
next time. Or dude, let me know and you guys can shoot me your addresses and I can try and shoot you some free flashlights if you guys want. So.
I did get you guys this email, but I got all
Think Leo, maybe take 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes, but I was just thinking.